welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Sana Maqbool, with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important stories. The first of which is with reference to what is going on in India. We have talked at length about the suffering that the Muslim population in India continues to experience, along with a lot of other minorities in India as well. And we've also talked about how we don't really see the kind of responses from the international community that we want to see. But in a good development, we've seen some sort of acknowledgement and concern and condemnation shared by the United States with regards to what is happening to the Muslim population in India, the kind of discrimination, violence and torture that they have been experiencing for such a while now has been spoken about. Along with that, a report has also been released earlier this week which sort of highlights the issues and the measures that have been actively taken against the Muslim population, also highlighting the involvement of senior government officers and also the way that the role of human rights organizations has been restricted on a state level, and how that, of course, is also contributing to the Muslim population suffering along with other minorities as well. We've also seen that this has come from the US with regards to the human rights abuses in India, and we also know that the State Department has spoken about this report and has said that India needs to do something about it, and this is something that is, of course, concerning to the United States. It's a welcome development, but what really would that mean in terms of how the international community is going to respond to that? Because, of course, Pakistan has been the one asking for the international community to be able to respond to what is going on in India and relieve the people of their suffering. Whether or not we are going to see any real change in the situation and lives of the people of India still remains a question mark. In our second segment, we'll be taking a look at the new cabinet in Pakistan. We've seen that the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's 37-member cabinet took oath earlier today by Chairman Senate, and we know that 31 federal ministers, 3 ministers of state and 3 advisors have been appointed, and they have taken oath. And we've seen a number of the ministries being distributed among different parties. We're expecting some of the seats also with other smaller parties as well to be distributed, but major developments with regards to the ministries has already been carried out. An important development with the foreign policy and the foreign ministry, of course, was that when we looked at who was going to be the candidate for that slot, of course, the Bilawal Bhutto's name was the one that was coming up, but we have not seen him take oath today, and there are news reports that he might be doing that in a couple of days. Whether or not that actually happens still remains to be seen. But the impact that this cabinet is going to have on the way the government is run, how the different parties are going to be able to work together, has everyone's reservations been fulfilled, is everyone satisfied with the cabinet at the moment, is what we're going to be discussing in our segment today, and also taking a look at what had happened earlier in the Punjab Assembly and the development after that, when we know that the CM-elect in Punjab has gone to court with regards to his oath taking as well, and of course the kind of violence that transpired over the weekend. So we'll talk about all of these issues in the debate today. And as always, we've been joined in the studios by Raja Faisal and Farrukh Pitafi. And for our first segment in the show, we've also been joined by 2 guests. Mandeep Singh Bajwa, who's a strategic affairs analyst, has joined us online. And Mr. Nasir Ali Khan, who's a former ambassador, has also joined us online. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us in the show today. When we look at what has happened in India, this is something that we have seen happening for such a long time. And of course, the kind of discrimination, violence that has existed there is not limited to Muslims only. I'll start with you, Ambassador Saab. The situation, of course, has deteriorated a lot with the way that the public has been saffronized and how so much of the fabric of the society has been tainted with this ideology. And it's increasingly difficult to be able to bring about any change. But the development with the report and the US actually criticizing and condemning and talking about the issues at the platform surely should have an impact on the way that the international community is going to respond to that. Do you have any hopes with regards to the statements that have come out?
Whom was this question put to?
Ambassador sir, I'm asking you.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were addressing the other guests.
No problem.
Could you repeat the question, please?
So I'm looking at the situation in India, we've seen it for a while now, what has been happening. But the welcome development has been that the United States has spoken something about it. But whether or not that's going to translate into the international community actually responding in a way that changes the situation for the Muslim population is, of course, still something that remains to be seen. Do you have hopes that this statement has an impact in terms of the consequences that India is going to face?
Well, it is gratifying to see that the United States has actually made a statement with respect to human rights in general in India. However, this statement also comes as a result of the push from certain people in Congress, the progressives in the Democratic Party, as well as certain minority groups, as well as human rights organizations. And it is also coming along with a human rights report that talks about many other violations, including extrajudicial killings, including torture and things like that. However, I feel that there is no direct statement that has come in the wake of these incidents that's taken place. But nevertheless, I am happy that it did. And as for your question, will other people follow? I'm hoping that they will, because the incident that happened, especially when you have bulldozers demolishing people's homes before any case, before any accusation, it reminded me of Gaza and what the Israelis are doing over there. There was no court case, there was no FIR against these people. So this is something which is very new. And I have to say that the Supreme Court in India ought to have taken cognizance of this as well. But the rest of the international community, especially people in the West that have ignored human rights violations in India, I'm hoping that they will also take note of this.
Right. Mr. Mandeep Singh, when we look at the report, it also mentions that there has been serious government corruption, serious harassment of the international organizations, especially linked to human rights, non-governmental organizations as well. And we've seen that there have been restrictive measures taken with regards to their funding and their functioning in India. When we look at these developments, is there a way to go about any legal measures that can be taken when we look at the way that the government has been involved in the processing and the functioning of human rights organizations? Could there be not any mechanism that the way we can actually approach this and be able to alleviate the restrictive measures that are there?
Well, human rights organizations face problems all over the world. I mean, certainly a lot of them are genuine, and they take up people's genuine problems and try to solve them. Some are, of course, political and, indulge in propaganda. But restricting myself to the genuine organizations, they face problems all over the world. I think India's no different. And there are certain problems, and as you've talked about funding, about restrictions on their their activities and all. I agree that the little attitude should be given to them, and their voice should be heard, not only in India but abroad also. And I think the whole world can do much better by listening to human rights organizations, and taking note of their concerns. And saying, I mean, human rights it's a global issue. It concerns everybody. It's not specific to any single country. So I agree with you
Right,
that.
but the extent and the level of abuse and the human rights violations that exist in India are, of course, something that need to be talked about at a different scale, no?
But well, that's a matter of contention. I mean, I can point out 10 times more human rights violations in Pakistan, but that's not the issue. I mean, we must work together to resolve these contentious issues. We must work together to uphold the dignity of mankind, rather than level allegations against each other. And what is
Bajwa
achieved at
Sahab,
the end of the day
Bajwa
by
Sahab,
such.
I understand that human rights might be just another issue, and human rights are important, but not that much. But my concern regarding Pakistan, whatever you said can be pointed out in Pakistan, it is our lookout, and we are going to actually fight for it. Why is it that India's civil society, that once used to be so boisterous in defense of its minorities, all of a sudden has gone silent?
No, I don't think there is a change in civil society. I think we're still as strong as ever. There are strains, there are certain stresses, but I think civil society is combating them. I mean, the media is, pointing out all these problems. People are speaking up. These issues are being raised in Parliament, and I'm quite sure that we will soon overcome these problems. I don't think that these problems are of a magnitude which can't be solved or can't be resolved. And at the end of the day, every Indian has the power to change the system, to change
Ambassador
the
Nasser.
party in power.
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
Ambassador Nasser, by the looks of it, in today's India, do you think that the number of people or civil society that used to be in past has shrunk now? And of course, that is why we are seeing all of these problems taking place. We know in the past that obviously communal violence was conducted against, in 1984 was conducted against the Sikhs as well. Now it is against Muslims. And do you think that the way Bajwa Saab is saying that, oh, Pakistan shouldn't be worried about it, Pakistanis are only worried about humanity. It's not that just because they are Muslims and we are worried about it. We just worried about the humanity and the human rights violence which is taking place in India.
And Ambassador Saab, if you can, I wanted to solicit one more comment from you regarding something that is happening now. Any vocal people who were actually pointing out these mistakes somehow are included in India's no-fly list. For example, Akar Patel and umpteen other, very, vocal journalists. Rana Ayub as well, very vocal journalists as well. So why is that happening if India is really everything is hunky-dory in India?
No, I'm pretty sure that there's a very, very serious problem in the very fabric of Indian society. You see, these kind of communal riots and Hindu-Muslim riots started way back in 1948. If you remember when forces went into Hyderabad, when they tried, Hyderabad Deccan tried to declare themselves, there were between 40,000 to 200,000 people killed in 1948. In Gujarat itself, starting from 1969, then 85, and then 2002, they have had riots. Now, the fundamental difference here is that let's take this recent Ram Navami incident, which was not one incident. It took place across 8 or 10 places. There were 8 or 10 places where it happened simultaneously. Now, ostensibly, this is to celebrate the birthday of Lord Ram. Instead of going to their mosques, these people had headed, to their temples. They had deliberately and in an organized manner headed towards mosques. Saffron flags were planted there. One mosque was burned. Several people were not only attacked, but people who were praying. There was provocative music and songs and people threatening genocide and stuff like that. Now, the important thing is that, this is, since these state elections, out of 5 state elections, in 3 states, the BJP came back in power. And I think this has emboldened this whole narrative of the RSS or the Bajrang Dal or, the whole narrative that India now belongs to Hindus. And just like Pakistan belongs to Muslims, India belongs to Hindus and any
Right.
other
And,
religion
and
that.
Ambassador Saab, I want to talk about more about this narrative as well from Mr. Mandeep Singh as well. But earlier, Mr. Singh, you were talking about something with reference to the media. Mandeep Singh, when we look at the situation in India and what you've mentioned earlier with regards to media in India, you've said that they play perhaps a responsible role. There has been a lot of evidence that has, of course, surfaced with the kind of propaganda campaign that exists. And of course, we've seen a lot of issues with regards to any difference of opinion or anybody talking against perhaps the BJP or the Hindutva ideology. Is that not the case? Do you really think that the media in India is playing a responsible, educative or informative role for the people in India?
Well, generally, by and large, I mean, if you leave out some of the, sort of less reputable TV channels or actually the TV channels only, I think the print media is probably, very responsible. Some of the TV channels are, shall I say, not that responsible. But generally speaking, the TV channels do see things in an unbiased light, and where areas of concern are addressed, these various issues are brought up, and there are very vigorous debates. I mean, so many people from Pakistan take part, and sometimes debates get very heated. But generally, the media is free, and they do, criticize the government. I don't think that the media is under the thumb of the government, and
Right.
yeah,
Bajo Sahab,
that's how it is.
I must actually compliment you for putting up a bold face. But sir, with due respect, when it comes to certain circumstances, you are right. Human rights violations have been going on in Pakistan as well. Recently, there was Pitafi Kumara's case. But there we saw yesterday a Pakistani court awarded six people death sentence, and umpteen other were punished for actually with imprisonment. But similarly, when you talk about the role of courts in India, from hijab ban to the lynching of Pehlu Khan, we see that the murderers and perpetrators just walk away. For example, in Pehlu Khan's case, the last remaining four perpetrators were let go last year in August by the courts. So you wouldn't see any systemic problem taking place in India right now, sir?
I think as far as judiciary is concerned, I don't think there's much of a difference between India and Pakistan. I think both countries need to clean up their act, and I mean, if you find that in both countries trials taking decades and decades, and people getting let off on very what say spurious grounds and things. So I mean, none of us, neither of us can point fingers at the other as far as justice is concerned. So let's resolve to clean up our own acts.
All right,
And
Mr. Mandeep Singh, do you think that the kind of issues that you're raising right now are welcome in India? When if you point fingers at the government, perhaps hold them accountable, hold different politicians accountable for the kind of speeches they've made, is not taken badly by the politicians, because as far as we know, it's even hard to take a joke. There are so many comedians as well who've been targeted by the Hindutva ideology, and senior officers in government and elsewhere as well.
And cartoonists were arraigned actually.
politicians are the same the world over. They hate being criticized. They hate being lampooned. They hate they even hate humor. So it's it's Mug's choice between this country or that country. But you find that there is a great industry for political memes or humor here in India. I mean, Pakistan also similarly. I mean, some of the Pakistani political humor which I come across, I mean, that leaves me in splits. And by right now, I mean, even during Ziaul Haq's repressive regime, I mean,
Ambassador
all
Saab, Ambassador Nasir.
All right.
Yeah, Ambassador Nasir, do you think that if we expect some kind of change within India, that could only be possible through if the leadership at the top changes? And of course, the leadership at the top, it comes with the kind of vote the RSS Hindutva ideology is behind it, and then of course BJP, the kind of narratives they use in their speeches. Of course, that needs to change, and if that changes, only then we can see a sort of change in the Indian society, sir.
Yes, absolutely. What is disheartening is that this narrative, this policy that the BJP government has adopted, in that they are going to ostracize Muslims and other minorities, it seems to be working with the electorate. I mean, on two occasions in the last general elections, we thought that the Indian public, the majority of whom I believe are still secular in their thoughts, and they are a democratic state. And I also accept that in Pakistan there are many human rights violations, and there are journalists being persecuted. There are judges whose conduct is also suspect at times. But what concerns me the most is that a political party which swept the last general elections, and then in the largest state in India, the Uttar Pradesh, where a lot of people were saying that they might lose the elections this time, they came back with a thumping majority, which means that their narrative sells, which means that when the Indians, especially the poor and the unemployed, are not given what the government promised them, instead of that, they start this narrative of them being proud Hindus, and that this land basically belongs to them, and that nothing else, nobody else really matters here. You are talking about 220 million Muslims who are living in a state of absolute fear. I mean, mostly it used to be in the north and the central part of India. Now Karnataka and this thing is moving into the south. That is what concerns me most. I mean, there are human rights violations all over the world, but not something that happens at this scale.
All right.
Mandeep Bajwa Saab, would you agree with Ambassador Nasir that, of course, if we look at the UP elections, the Uttar Pradesh elections, just before the elections, there were communal violence, and of course, a mosque was burned, and several other mosques, they were vandalized. That is how the Yogi ji won the election?
I wouldn't quite go so far as to say that. I think mainly, the welfare schemes which they initiated, a strong man image of the chief minister and the party, quite a lot of dwelling on national security and muscular attitude. And yes, trend towards majoritarianism brought them victory. But if they read too much into it, then they will go wrong. And the electorate is very fickle, and it can easily turn against them if they fail to deliver in terms of economics, in terms of jobs, in terms of a better life for everybody. So that is a warning for the BJP that they cannot persist for too long with the kind of agenda which they're ramming through at the moment, and they'll have to get down to serious issues of governance very soon.
Especially when the world is looking.
Farrukh, you wanted to add something?
Right. Regarding the electorate being fickle and India's electoral problems as well, we are appreciative of that. We understand what is going on. A huge number of Indian population, Sana, is actually under 20 or around 20. These are people who were not even born on 2002, right? Perhaps they were born at that time, but that was the only time they knew, but would have no memory of Gujarat or whatever happened, nothing of 1992 or elsewhere. But the problem at this moment is that India has a long history of heroism and secularism as well. Start with Gandhi, Ambedkar, Bhagat Singh. Heroism never ended in India. But now it seems that all of a sudden they have been switched. There has been a bait and switch regarding politics. And of course, the secular political parties are also to blame because, for example, in UP, the reason the CM is successful, one of the slogans were that he is very good with law and order. And there was gangster life which was affected or displaced by the gentleman, despite the fact that he himself is a gangster, right? But regardless of whatever is happening in India, my concern is that it comes out of the book of Kautilya or Chanakya, where he had actually instructed people to go for rice bowl stratagem, where gradually start attacking the outpost and demoralize a community. And that is what is happening with the Muslims. It will start with, it has started with Christians, and then you will see that Sikhs will also be targeted. True. These are people who are trying to change the character of Indian society, and then Indian media particularly has been bought off by 2 or 3 billionaires, and they keep on actually peddling whatever nonsense they want. The kind of obnoxious journalism that we see there, once there was a time that we used to actually learn from our Indian peers. Now it is embarrassing, honestly, when you travel internationally to actually being referred to South Asia, where Indian media is reporting from television, people look at the screens and they laugh. Right, and then the courts and institutions, there is an elite capture, particularly of Hindutva brigands of the state, and that worries me because India is such a big country, it cannot afford to fail. We cannot let India fail, and this is the problem. The people who are sitting there, particularly like our good friend Bajwa Sahab, they don't want to see the problem, but it is so huge. If God forbid something happens, it will create such a big problem for the region and all our lives that we will not be able to actually, live in peace for a long time. So I request my Indian friends to open their eyes and confront that reality.
Right, and we are almost out of time for this segment, but I want to ask 2 quick questions from Mandeep Singh and Mr. Nasir. Mandeep Singh, when we look at the situation in India, forget about, I understand, of course, when you want to see what's common in different parts of the world as well and how different countries function, but if we just talk about what's wrong with India, of course, there's a lot of things that have been mentioned. There is a report, there is a reason why it came out. What does the Indian population or the Indian government offices or you in your own capacity would want to do about it? What needs to be done to fix that?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I think, the thing is that time and tide, wait for no man. And as I told you, as I said earlier, the common man in India has the biggest power at his hands, his vote. And there have been many other theories earlier, many other political ideologies which have come and which have gone solely through the power of the common man's vote. So,
all right. We're almost out of time, so I'll just quickly go to Mr. Nasir. When we talk about Pakistan's efforts, of course, Pakistan has been advocating this and calling on the international community to respond, and there's much that we've done in this regard. But what more can we do in terms of actual efforts being done or actually the voices of the people in India being heard?
Look, there is nothing in terms of physical this thing that we can do. We can lobby countries that can possibly have an influence on India, and we can send envoys to make them aware of what exactly is happening over there. I need to reiterate the fact that what has happened 6 or 7 days ago is very, very different. There are 2 things that are different. The fact that an action like this took place in 8 or 10 places in 5 or 6 states simultaneously, it shows that the government is part of this thing. It is not only protecting or refusing to condemn such incidents, it is now beginning to organize these things. Right. The other thing that concerns me is that when you saw the houses of Muslims being demolished there, they were not being demolished by mobs. They were being demolished by bulldozers which the government, the authorities had sent. So the Home Minister decided to be judge and jury and executioner. And Mr. Mishra just said, these are the people who are to blame in all this, and go and bulldoze their houses. Can you even
Absolutely.
imagine that happening in a democracy?
Absolutely. Absolutely, we understand that. Thank you so much, Mr. Nasir, for joining us, and Mr. Mandeep Singh for being a part of the show and talking to us with regards to the situation in India. We'll now move on to our next segment where we look at the situation at home. We know that the 37-member cabinet has just taken oath today, and there have been a lot of ministries that have been divided into different political parties. Farrukh, why don't you give our viewers an overview of which party got what?
Right. The numbers have been seen by the media already, by the people, but when you talk about the domination,
Right.
dominance is actually went to PMLN. PMLN got the largest number of members, but then People's Party was very close with that number as well, 11, and they now have major stakes in the system as well. Then JUIF, which hardly has any presence, got 4 cabinet positions, and other political parties also got some. But regarding the main ministries, the first one that I was really looking at was Finance Ministry, because the country is going through a financial problem, crisis of sorts. So Miftah Ismail is going to be the advisor who's going to head the ministry, but Aisha Ghaus Pasha is going to be the junior minister who is going to help him, and she is also from PMLN. Then the foreign ministry, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari did not take oath today. We saw that this ministry had a junior minister also. Hinara Panikkar has taken over. She has gone and joined in. The reports are that Bilawal Bhutto Zardari is traveling. When he comes back, he will take oath, but that is also conditional to certain issues being resolved. 3 parties, coalition parties, did not get any representation, so he is pushing that they also be included. But then the number will keep on escalating. It already is around 40, and then Mariam Aurangzeb got our information ministry that concerns media, and she hit the ground running. Immediately after taking oath, she actually spoke to the press, and she actually pointed out that PMDA is gone, and the not cyber wing, but social media wing or the information ministry will be abolished as well. So everybody who was complaining about certain regulations or certain methods to undercut the media freedom, they are also, those complaints are being addressed as we speak. This is the claim, at least.
Right.
And there are umpteen other ministries, but of course, these are very predominant ones. Please.
All right. Let me also welcome in the show Mr. Ahmed Jawad, who's a leader PMLN, and he's joined us online. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Jawad, for joining us. When we look at the cabinet members that have taken oath today, and the different parties taking in with different ministries, there of course have been developments with regards to dear reservations that were talked about and shown by different political parties as well, and a lot of them seem to be still underway. Can you help us identify whether or not the current cabinet or the way that the cabinet has transpired today is something that meets the reservations of different political parties such as the JUIF?
I think there are still some reservations, and I think that probably is the reason that Bilawal Bhutto has not taken oath today, and he is flying to London. But I think majority of the cabinet has taken oath today. So basically, what a government needs, a prime minister needs a cabinet to start with, which was unnecessarily delayed. But at the same time, there were reasons which are known to us, that it was the, I think, negotiation between the allied parties, and that took some time. But I think today, majority of ministers are in place. The new government, I think, has started work from today, I can say.
Right, Ahmed Jawad Sahab, regarding a very interesting social media campaign that is going on, and that is being actually is coming from PTI. Given that you have some knowledge of PTI as well, and you understand the current political system as well, unlike me, who is actually no lands man. But regarding your understanding, this comparison of portfolios of the previous ministers during PTI and then the current one, do you think that it will get any kind of traction?
The comparison between past PTI
PTI
information
ministers
ministers
and the
and
current
the
ministers,
current
right?
ones.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Social media campaigns, particularly health ministry comparison, that previously there was a doctor, now Abdul Qadir Patel is going to be the Minister of Health, National Health, and similar kind of projects where they keep on actually undercutting the legitimacy of the current government.
I think, first of all, the performance of any minister, whether it is Kadir Patel or anybody else, that we can see in the coming days. Perhaps at this stage we cannot comment because today they have just started their journey. And as far as the social media is concerned, uh, in my opinion, some big steps need to be taken. Otherwise, in my opinion, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is the only political party in Pakistan which has adopted uh, legal and illegal, both, but tactics which are based on legal and illegal both. And they have adapted themselves to the modern techniques of perception management. And that is the reason that when we look at the digital canvas of Pakistan today, it looks like that there is some huge shift in the public opinion, which is not there actually, but
On
digital
the ground.
space definitely is reflecting something else.
Yeah.
And
Ahmed Jawad Sahab, yeah, Ahmed Jawad Sahab, looking at the foreign affairs, of course, foreign policy of Pakistan, let's talk about if Pakistan's bilateral relations with the US, they were a little strained previously, and now we have challenges of obviously FATF and getting out of the grey list, and then there are certain issues with the Gulf countries as well. And very importantly, we have Afghanistan next doors going on. What do you think? Which one would be the biggest challenge for the foreign ministry?
I think there are multiple. We can't single out one challenge. On one hand, we need, uh, I would say, repair to the relationship which were damaged in last couple of months with United States. We need to break the deadlock with the IMF, which I think the first step is already taken. We need to come out of FATF. It's another challenge. Our relationships with India obviously was also in a deadlock, and the previous regime was waiting for a single call from Modi. But the good news is that at least Modi has started talking. He congratulated the new prime minister, the new government. United States is also responding positively. China has responded positively.
Ahmed
Uh,
Jawad Sahab,
I
the former Ahmed Jawad Sahab, former Prime Minister, he said that if the abrogation of 370 and 35A is reversed, he will be talking to Modi. And what about the current one? What would we be expecting from them?
I think there is already an announcement from the Prime Minister where he has responded back to Modi. And one of the issue he has mentioned it is about the peaceful resolution of Kashmir. And at the same time, he has insisted upon the regional peace and stability trade between the two countries. So I think all the issues on the table. And the most important thing is that we cannot make a start until we agree to talk to each other. And
All right,
previously,
Mr. Jawad, when we look
it
at the
was only
situation
one-sided
with
effort
reference
by
to Bilawal Bhutto's oath taking, of course, earlier you pointed out that there may be some reservations, which is why perhaps there is a delay. But is there a confirmation that you can give us that we will be having a Bilawal Bhutto taking oath as the foreign minister, because the reservations still continue to exist, or do you think they are minimal enough to be met by the current government, and there is a surety that Bilawal Bhutto will be taking oath?
I think these are all issues related to the the complexities of when there are multiple parties, they have to make a joint government. So there are always demands and expectations, and they have to be settled between the top leadership. Obviously, it cannot become a debate at any other level, and that is why perhaps I'm not even sure about that. That is why Bilawal is traveling to London. Uh, Definitely has to be settled between the top leadership.
Yeah,
But
it is being reported as such as well. But Emma Jawad sahab, let me ask you another question regarding the state of affairs and preparedness regarding the elections also. We understand that eventually, within 1 year, we have to start moving towards the next election. And while you are actually holding power, and government has been formed and there are going to be policy interventions, there's conversing continues from PTI. Now the question at this moment is that you wouldn't want that space to be left alone. So there will be a time when you'll have to go out and start talking to the people. For that, in order to actually fight the optics, there must be a minimalist plan and a maximalist plan, that you are going to actually have at least these things that you want to accomplish before the next elections, and then of course fixing economy and other things which might actually come under the rubric of maximalist plan. Let me ask you, what is your minimalist plan at this moment?
yes, Farrukh, I would like to mention the announcement of Maulana Fazlur Rahman. I think he's always very brief, concise, and to the point. One of the things he mentioned that the maximum time this government might have is 1 year. So obviously, we are talking about the total 5 years government of this assembly. And at the same time, he said that the elections can happen in 3 months, in 6 months, or maximum 1 year. So first of all, I think every political party must understand that the election preparation should start, and even if it's after 1 year. But the question which you have asked, I think that is very uh, for every political party, not just for PMLN or People's Party or those who are in government. That is consensus on the election reforms. Because if you recall, the last time when PTI government brought uh, election reforms in the shape of EVM machines and internet voting, it was
Right. Mr. Ahmed, I also want to talk a little bit about what happened in the Punjab Assembly. When we look at what had happened during the weekend, this was, of course, something that was quite unfortunate for all of us. But when we look at now the questions that are being raised, and we have Hamza Shabazz also filing a petition in the High Court, and then, of course, the governor speaking about the legality of the elections. Of course, it remains to be seen what the court decides. But in your opinion, does the impact and the violence that was witnessed in the assembly actually create a legal problem for the elections?
whenever there is a, I think, deadlock or constitutional deadlock. For example, we have witnessed that in National Assembly, in the Parliament, and now we are seeing it in Punjab. Obviously, political parties, they have to seek help from the judiciary, and this is what is happening in Punjab. It's a situation of uncertainty, constitutional deadlock, and the worst is that the governance of Punjab is obviously at stake since last 1 month, because first of all, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, he took resignation from
All right.
Buzdar. then
All right. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time, Mr. Ahmed, and we'll have to conclude today. Yes, Farrukh, you want to add something?
Very quickly,
Yes.
while you, at the start, you had asked me about people who have got ministries, right? I just wanted to point out one thing, of course, it keeps happening in Pakistan as well, that women are not getting that kind of representation. Although there are 5 women who got the seats, and let us celebrate their taking over. Particularly, Shari Rahman Sahaba got climate change. I'm a huge fan of her prowess, her diplomatic prowess, and I think that when you think about foreign policy, out of foreign policy, I think climate change is the critical key post that could have gone to her, and that is, and then Shazia Marie also got her BISP. So there are 5 women, but I wish in a parliament where there is such a boisterous representation of women, there would have been more joining the cabinet.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Jawad, for being with us today and being part of the debate. Thank you very much, Farrukh and Faisal, as always. That's all we have from the debate now. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.